Hello everyone, this is Ohio Dan. I wanted to make a video about something that I'm going to talk in some abstract ways, so it might be hard for me to give concrete examples of what I'm saying, but I think it's a video that's worth making, and it's going to be part of my Life 101 series, where I talk about things that I wish that I understood from my late teens through my mid-20s or so, that I feel like I have a grasp on now, but I didn't when I was younger. And these are things that would have been useful for me to understand. And this particular video, the subject matter is, again, in a sort of broad sense, good versus bad life decisions. And the main idea that I want to convey in this video is that you want to make good decisions for yourself as much as you possibly can, because life is difficult and you don't know when a bad decision could have a really harmful impact on you. You don't want to deliberately make bad decisions for yourself. It's important to maximize the number of good decisions that you're able to make in your life, just again in a very broad sense, in order to improve your chances at a good outcome in life, to meet your goals, to have the type of lifestyle that you want to have. You've got to make good decisions for yourself, or a lot of different things can come along and derail you and prevent you from meeting those goals or having the type of life that you want to have. It's very difficult, from what I've experienced, from what I've noticed with myself, to know which decisions that you make will be the most important or impactful ones versus the ones that end up not mattering whatsoever. While you're engaged in those decisions, it's very difficult to know, okay, for example, if I decide that I'm going to get drunk and make a fool out of myself today, is that going to impact my life? Well, maybe not. Maybe you can do that several times and no one says anything about it and no one has a problem and you keep your job and you're not in debt or anything. You're not in poverty because you're spending all your money on alcohol. But eventually something could happen to where you get into a fight, or you cheat on a partner because you're wasted, or somebody that you work with got insulted and then get you fired or something like that along those lines. It's very easy for something like that to get completely out of hand. And really, from what I've learned, is that the only way you know that that can't happen is to never put yourself in that kind of situation. You can also see this in terms of women, right? You can have this sort of pump and dump PUA type of philosophy if you want to have casual relations with random women, but eventually you're probably going to get a disease, or eventually you're probably going to get an accusation of sexual misconduct or even actual rape made against you. And once you're in that situation, what are you going to do? Well, you can and should defend yourself, but at the same time, you would have been better off just not engaging in that sort of lifestyle in the first place. Then you wouldn't have a disease, or then you wouldn't have legal problems. Then you wouldn't have lost your job because of an accusation made against you. So those types of things, and there are a lot of other things that can fit into that. What I've discovered for myself, at least, is that everyone will screw up and make poor decisions at times. Even when you're trying your best not to, you're going to make poor decisions at times for yourself. That's just kind of part of the way life is. But if a high percentage of choices that you make for yourself are good ones, we stand a much better chance at a successful outcome for ourselves compared to regularly making poor choices basically on purpose, whether it's with women, with alcohol, with drugs, whatever the case may be. It doesn't have to be that drastic of a thing either. You can just waste a lot of time watching TV, or waste a lot of time that you could spend doing other things to improve your life, playing video games and whatnot. And I used to do a lot of that. And I feel like if I hadn't had that approach, maybe I could have used that time to actually better myself, to actually learn a skill, or to actually apply myself in certain ways. And I want to make it clear that I'm not saying that if in your estimation it's not a bad choice, then you can do whatever you think is best for yourself, right? I'm not saying you can't enjoy alcohol. I'm not saying that you can't play games for considerable periods of time. I'm not saying that you can't do any of these things. What I'm saying is when it reaches a level where it's just a bad choice, then it's really not something that you should be engaged in. This whole idea of let's make bad choices together, that's actually pretty dumb. I've had some bad results with that, not to the extent of really hardcore bad outcomes like going to jail or getting someone pregnant or getting a disease or something like that, But I've made enough bad, smaller scale choices to realize I don't want to do those kinds of things. That's not healthy, regardless of your age, to purposely make bad choices in those kinds of situations. So again, purposely making a bad choice, whether it's related to drugs, alcohol, relationships in women, or anything else, only serves to increase the probability that something bad will eventually happen to you instead of being able to meet your goals or to live the type of life that you want to live. I think from my experience, when I've consistently made the best choices I could for myself, even at a small scale, right? Even trying not to be distracted by things and saying, all right, I'm going to simplify what I'm doing here, because if I'm distracted, this situation is going to turn out worse when I'm not able to concentrate on a job that I'm trying to do. Or maybe I'm not efficient with my time, and so I don't get to the things that I should have been able to get to today. I have always had better success when I try to make the best decisions possible for myself on a daily basis, even at a smaller scale like that, without even getting into drugs and alcohol and that sort of conversation. Those kinds of choices, when you find yourself deliberately making a bad choice or choosing a bad option, that's a problem. And I look at myself in the past and I realize that that's been a problem for me. I believe that the quantity of good versus bad decisions that we make for ourselves matters substantially in whether or not we can achieve our goals or move things forward for ourselves in a positive way. Even if a situation is difficult, even when you don't have too many good options available to you, making the best choices that you can on an everyday basis is really important. And over the long run, it does have a positive impact. I've noticed that in terms of myself recently versus, again, in my late teens through mid-20s, when I didn't necessarily make the best choices for myself. I've seen better long-term outcomes because the good decisions that I've been able to make have outweighed the times where I've screwed up, the times where I made a choice that I should have made, even if it wasn't on purpose. The good choices have managed to outweigh that in general. Now, again, I'm not saying that you couldn't wake up tomorrow and go into town and accidentally, get hit by a bus because you made a bad choice. Something like that can happen, where your whole life gets destroyed. But that's very unlikely as long as you're not purposely making those kinds of bad, reckless decisions. That can be another example. If you're reckless with how you drive all the time on a consistent basis, then you might have a screw up. You might have a little accident, and there may not be a whole lot you can do about that, but you can avoid a lot of negative situations on the road by just taking it seriously and trying to make good decisions on that basis as well, where you're not being reckless, where you're not putting yourself in a situation to have an accident, where you're not going to get tickets or whatnot, where if you were driving like a mad person, you may end up in that situation. So all these different sort of aspects of life, again, it's harder for me to come up with concrete examples of this, although I think I've done basically a fair job of that, where if you purposely make bad decisions, it's going to blow up in your face. If you decide that you're going to abuse alcohol on a regular basis, you're going to have problems. If you decide that you're going to use drugs off the streets, you're going to have problems eventually. If you're banging every woman out there that wants to sleep with you because you're an attractive guy, or maybe you're just paying to play or whatever, you can do that, but it's going to catch up with you eventually. In cases where it's pay to play, maybe you're a little bit more protected because it's harder for them to say that there was no agreement, but still, given the sort of gynocentric reality of this society, that can happen. You can get accusations made against you anyway, I'm sure. And so, honestly, I think it's really important and worthwhile to make the best decisions that you can for yourself on a consistent basis so that those good choices can outweigh the slip-ups. They can outweigh the bad sort of situations that you may have found yourself in where you didn't make the best choice. Hopefully, the good choices can give you a better outcome overall if you do that consistently as much as you can. I've noticed that when I haven't done that, and when I've allowed myself to get away from that in the past, or I wasn't doing that in the first place when I was younger, you end up with bad outcomes eventually. It's inevitable that something's going to blow up in your face. And life is hard enough as it is, especially as a guy in our Western society today that really is all about trying to take advantage of you in so many ways. You want to make the best decisions that you can for yourself in regards to the people that you associate with, the lifestyle that you choose, the type of stuff that you do on a daily basis, whether it's with work, whether it's anything else that you're doing. So many things are out there that are basically a trap or a pitfall for you, especially for younger men today, that one of the things that you can control for the most part is making good decisions for yourself. Make the best decisions that you can for yourself that are rational, that look at your long-term success or the goals that you want to achieve, rather than bad decisions that are going to get you into trouble eventually. Even if you can get away with them for some time to come, eventually it's going to catch up with you if you don't outweigh that with the good decisions that you can make for yourself. So again, I've experienced better outcomes personally when consistently focusing on making the best choices available that I can make, given that I'm flawed and I'm going to make poor choices at times, compared to using a more lax or whatever happens approach, right? That's something else that I would recommend against. That whatever happens is basically just an excuse for doing something you shouldn't do. And it may be something you can laugh off. It may be something you can get away with. You can be with a particular woman that may be very promiscuous and essentially gives it up to everybody, and maybe you won't get her pregnant, or maybe she won't give you a disease, but there's always a chance that she can, and if you continue to do that, it's going to eventually bite you in the ass. Same with alcohol abuse, same with a lot of the reckless behaviors that you see. You want to avoid that intentionally. You want to willfully and intentionally not do those kinds of things, because life is already hard. There are already enough forces that can defeat you, and you have a much better chance at overcoming those forces if you make consistently good choices for yourself, instead of allowing yourself to make poor choices, to basically have an immature perspective and just not have a healthy lifestyle. When you do those kinds of things on purpose, it will result in negative consequences down the road eventually. And so I'd recommend making the best choices for yourself that you can on a consistent basis, because things are already difficult in life. We're all flawed as human beings. We're all going to do things that we shouldn't do at times, or not take the proper action when we should. But in order to outweigh those things, I believe that it makes sense to make the best decisions that we can for ourselves on a consistent basis, not have this whatever happens sort of lifestyle or approach. And I think that that is a healthier way of looking at things that could lead and will lead overall to more positive outcomes in most cases, rather than just purposely making poor choices for yourself. That's not a good idea. That's not something that, in my opinion, has ever worked out for me. You want to make the best choices for yourself that you can in order to avoid negative outcomes.